Ja, du kan starte.
All right, I think we are starting. Thank you everybody for coming, and thank you to the Nordic Pavilion for having us. My name is Ida Klokman. I'm the International Advocacy Officer for the Danish Family Planning Association. In the Nordic countries, we're known as Sex and Samfund. And I'm also the coordinator of the international network called the Population and Sustainable Development Alliance, who is hosting this side event together with the Ministry of Foreign Affairs in Denmark. So I'm here to set the scene and steer us through the next 45 minutes of presentation and discussion. It's going to be great, I am sure. As you might have noticed, our side event was given the very catchy name, Climate Change, What Sex Got to Do With It. I think we needed a little Tina Turner for this COP22. And the answer to that question is, I can reveal, more than you think. And in this side event, we will attempt to answer the question with different presentations and discussions. We will refer to some of the interlinkages between sexual and reproductive health and rights and climate change, and discuss how access to comprehensive services, including modern methods of contraceptives and comprehensive sexuality education, are part of the solution for vulnerable countries and communities to adapt to the effects of climate change. Now first, setting the scene. With the adoption of the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development, the world's leaders acknowledged the interconnectedness between social, economic and environmental sustainability. And they recognized that human rights and gender equality are cross-cutting issues of crucial importance to all sectors, and efforts made to achieve these goals. Denmark and the Nordic countries were at the forefront fighting for the sexual and reproductive health and rights and for the goals on health and gender equality in the 2030 Agenda to include sexual and reproductive health and rights. And they succeeded to large parts. Now, the Paris Agreement, which we're discussing in these days, also recognizes the right to health, gender equality and human rights as matters that states need to consider when taking action to address climate change. That means that the international commitments have been made for these interlinkages to be made. Now we just need states to deliver on them. The Danish Family Planning Association and its colleagues in the Population and Sustainable Development Alliance are working on and advocating for the delivery to include integration of sexual and reproductive health and rights, population dynamics, health, gender, environment and climate change in projects and policies. And we do so because we see that that's what communities need. The communities that we work in Kenya, Uganda, Ethiopia, Madagascar, different countries in Central Asia, they have an urgent need for these services to be delivered. Access to modern forms of contraceptives, comprehensive sexuality education and safe abortion are effective ways of contributing to the many solutions needed to achieve social, economic and environmental sustainability for all. Because some countries and regions are experiencing very high population growth rates due to improved health, especially for pregnant women and women in delivery, unmet needs for family planning, patriarchal cultures of big families being a status symbol, and other reasons. And these countries who have high population growth rates also often have very big youth populations, with millions currently entering their reproductive age. And for these countries to utilize the so-called demographic dividend, which means that their youth live up to their full potential as active citizens and thus create a lot of growth and development to these countries, they need to have access to voluntary family planning services and information. And what we're seeing here now in COP22, as in all the other COPs we have attended, is that reproductive health and population dynamics are not very well understood in this environmental climate change sphere. They are to a large extent completely missing and referred to only as social issues. And And that is very wrong. We think they need to be incorporated as solutions and as part of the world that is, when the world is connected, our solutions need to be connected as well. So that was me setting the scene. Now, the program for today is that we will hear from these speakers, but first of all, we will watch a short film called Healthy People, Healthy Environment. It has been developed by the Wilson Center for Population, Health and Environment Ethiopia Consortium, which we will hear from in a moment, who is also a member of the Population and Sustainable Development Alliance. Then we will hear from the Executive Director from our Ethiopian Member Association, Mr. Nagash Teklu, who will tell us about how they practically incorporate sexual and reproductive health and rights and climate change efforts on a community level in Ethiopia. He might also tell us a little about how the Ethiopian government is among the very few governments who have actually acknowledged and included reproductive health in their national adaptation plans. And lastly, but not leastly, we have Mr. Jørgen Molde, who is the Danish ambassador to Morocco, who will tell us about the reasonings behind sexual and reproductive health and rights being such a big priority in Denmark, the history of that and why we prioritize that. Then we have, of course, a little Q&A at the end, and that should be it. So now I'm gonna show the film. I think.
ያየነው ስቃይ በእግር በበቅሎ ጉዞ ነበረ። እንግዲህ 4 ሰዓት ሰው ተሸክሞ 4 ሰዓት የነበረ ወደ 8 ሰዓት ሊሄድ ይችላል በሽተኛው ስላይደርስ።
A 4-hour drive from the capital city of Addis Ababa lies Ethiopia's Gurage zone, a remote and rural region of the country. Until 1961, most people here lived without paved roads and electricity. Since then, the Gurage People's Self-Help Development Organization, known as GIPSIDO, has built 550 kilometers of road. Villagers are now connected to nearby towns, increasing trade and providing access to hospitals and schools.
በመንገድ ስራው ብዙ ሰርቷል፣ ብዙ ቆይቷል። ያደረገው ብዙ ነገር ለምሳሌ ጠረጋ መንገድ ተሰጥቶ በጠረጋ መንገድ ሄደናል፣ በኮረኮንች መንገድ ሄደናል። አሁን ለአስፋልት ደረጃ ደርሰናል። ይሄ ራሱ አንድ እድገት ነው እና ያን ችግር ያየ ሰው ከአሁኑ ጋር ሲያመዛዝን የትና የት ልዩነት እንዳለው።
Building the road also built trust with the people in the Gurage. But as the community grew, they faced plenty of challenges that the road alone couldn't resolve. Decades of deforestation has ripped the rich topsoil from the earth, washing 1 billion tons into the Nile every year. The country's rural population has more than tripled, growing to 76 million, and poverty remains staggeringly high. And despite shorter trips to the hospital, the people of the Gurage, especially women, still lack basic health services.
The Gurage community faces various problems, so one intervention like road construction cannot give a sustained solution for the community's problem.
For community elders, one thing was clear: the solutions must be as interconnected as the problems. 6 years ago, an integrated approach to solving these problems gave the Gurage people a new road forward. This holistic way to create a more sustainable future is known as PHE, or Population, Health and Environment.
the community has a big ownership on the Gypsy Doe, and it's so simple to introduce PHE because it has been in Development Act interventions for more than 50 years.
If this new approach was going to work, everyone would need to take part. Pioneering elders like Tesema were key to building community support for PHE.
እና ወጣቱ አቀነባብሮ በልማቱ እንዲሳተፍ ቢደረግ ለሀገሪቷ እጅግ ከፍተኛ ጥቅም ሰጪ አካል ነው ብዬ ነው የምለው።
PHE is integrated. P means population, H means health, and E means environment. Those are not separate. And we do in PHE family planning. Family planning helps us to create a happy life of family.
Students at Harawat School actively support all kinds of PHE projects, from planting grasses to stabilize soil and prevent erosion, to frank discussions around adolescent health. The Gurage youth are passionate leaders. And as students become passionate about the PHE approach, they begin to speak with another generation, their parents.
መጀመሪያ ላይ አይቀበሉም። መጀመሪያ ላይ ያው ባህሉን ተጽዕኖ ስላለው እኔም ለመናገር እቸገራለሁ፣ እነሱም እንድናገር ራሱን አይፈቅዱም።
ስለዚህ ያ ተማሪ ደግሞ ወደ ወላጁ በመሄድ እነዚህ ነገሮች አባዬ ይሄ ትክክል አይደለም፣ መውለድ ያለብን እንደዚህ ነው፣ ልጅ ካልተወልድ ብዙ ልጅ ብትወልድ ከሆነ ለማስተማሪያ ለእንደዚህ ታጣለ።
ቤተሰብ ከበዛ ወይ ህዝቡ እድገቱ ከበዛ ማለት ነው ግዴታ ደንም ይጨፈጨፋል። ቤተሰብ ከተመጣጠነ ማለት ነው ደኖችን አይቆረጡም፣ አይጨፈጨፉም። ከብዙ ቆይታ ጊዜ በኋላ ነው እነሱ የተቀበሉ። ምክንያቱም ያው ግንዛቤ የተፈጠረላቸው ሲሄዱ ከእናቴ ጋር እንግዲህ ግልጽ የሆነ ውይይት አድርጌ እዚህ PHE ምን እንደሆነ ትምህርት ቤት ውስጥ ምን እንደተደረገ የቤተሰብ ምጣኔ ደግሞ ምን ያህል ጥቅም እንዳለው መጥቼ ለማዘርም ሆነ ለፋዘር አስረዳለሁ እዚህ ከትምህርት ቤት መልስ በኋላ።
ለኛም ደግፎናል። በሰው ታስተምረን እኛም ቁጠባ አድርገናል። ባለሙያ አማክረን እኛም ሆነ ያቆመናል። ሁለተኛ ደግሞ አካባቢውን እንደሚጠቅም እኛም ነግራለን።
As the PHE approach spread throughout the Gurage, its success depended not only on local organizations like Gypsy Doe, but also strong partnerships outside of the community. With the support from a nationwide network of PHE experts, government agencies, and international donors, the community was able to share these lessons across generational and gender gaps. This new approach gave people tools to address the daily challenges in their life. For young parents like Mengistu and Elfinesh, that meant talking about family planning first and foremost.
ሰርግ ሰረጉልን አመት እንደዛ ነው ከቆየሁ ልጅ ወልጃና ከዛም 6 አመት ቆየሁ። ይሄን ትምህርት ስሰማ ተጠቃሚ ሆነ። እናቴ የቤት ነበር የምትወል፣ 3 ቀን ትቆይ ነበር፣ እያነባች ነበር እናቴ የምትወል። አሁን እኔማ ጊዜ ሰጠኛ፣ ሰዓቱ ሰጠኝ። የእናቴማ ትዝ ይለኛል፣ ስቃይ ነበር። ብዙ እናቶቻችን ሞቱ። ልጁም እንትን ሳይሉ እንዳለ ሞቱ እናቶቻችን።
ያለፈው እንዳለፈ ሆኖ አሁን ያሉት ትውልዶች በእንደዚህ አይነት በጤና ጉለት ወይም ደግሞ በወሊድ ምክንያት መሞት የለባቸውም በሚል በራሴ ተነሳሽነት ብዙ ጊዜ እንደው ዘር ታጠፍ ያለሽ ተብዬ ነበር ተጽዕኖ የሚደርስብኝ ማለት ነው። ከዛ ደግሞ እኔ ደግሞ አይኔ ዘር እያጠፋሁ አይደለም ዘርን እያበለጸኩ ነው።
ብቻ ቀራን ማትበሳ አምቡላንስ ቀራን ማትበሳ አምቡላንስ አበሳና ከቁንጊ ያከም እንቸት ነው ምን ሊታሽ ክፍያ የለም ክፍያ ለነፃ አገልግሎት አስከራ
ሶም ያው እንደዚሁ ልክ ዛሬ እንዳያችሁት እየሰሩ ሌላውን ይመክራሉ። እነሱም ብቻ አንድ ለአምስት ብቻ ሳይሆን ሌላውን ጨምሮ እንዲህ በሚገናኙ ሰዓት ለቅሶ ስንቀመጥ ቡና ስንቀመጥ እና በተለያየ ስብሰባ ስንመጣ እንደዚህ አይነት እንመክራለን። እኛ ብቻ እኮ ምንም ለውጥ እናመጣ አንችልም። እዛ ያው አብረን ተያይዘን ለማደግ በጣም የቻልነው ጥረን በደንብ እንመክራለን።
ባትተናብርም ትጠቀሙ አሁኛ ለምሳሌ ምንም ታታፍር ኮንዶም ነው ፊልስ ክሊን ነው እንደገና ደግሞ ማርፌ ነው በዝን ሙፍታ ቤት ባይራሳክ በመረጥሽው
In these small groups, women can share their experiences with family planning and more. Trained community health volunteers like Alam answer questions and confront myths around birth control methods. Through peer-to-peer conversations like these, PHE has led to results. More women are using family planning, and more men are joining that conversation. Women are earning more money to support their families and their communities. Meanwhile, conservation projects are reviving the land and preserving the environment.
በፊት እኮ ስብሰባ ወጥተን ትምህርት ሰምተን መግባት እድል አልነበረም። አንቺ ሂጂ ስራሽ ጓዳ ነው መውለድ ልጅ ማሳደግ ከዛ በኋላ ኩሽና ስራሽ ስሪ ነበር ነው። አሁን እንደዚህ አይነት ነገሮች እየተቀረፉ
እኩል ምን ሆነ እኔ እና እሱ ከተጋባን በኋላ ያፈራነው ነገር ምንም ይሁን የጋራችን ነው። እኩል ነው።
አሁን ለገቢ ለራሷ ብላ ራሷ የገቢ ምንጭ ማስገኛ ራሷ የምትሰራው ስራዎች አሉ። ለራሷ ማለት አሁን በደቦ ጂበስ እንሰራ አይተሃል። ቃንጃ የምትፈትል ሌላለች መሰራለች። ይህን ሁሉ ሰርተን ለማንም አንድ ለአምስት አደረዳጆች በደቦ አድርገን ያ ነገር ወዴት ነው የምናደርገው? ወደ ራሳችን የገቢ ምንጭ ነው የምናደርገው ማለት ነው።
What began as a single road is now a trailblazing development program that can adapt and grow with the people it serves. Through an approach that rests on community ownership, Gypsido has enabled Ethiopians to craft their own solutions to the challenges they face.
ያው ማለት በፊት የተለያዩ ችግሮች ነበሩ። አሁን ግን ያው አብዛኛው ማህበረሰብ ግንዛቤ እየተፈጠረለት ስለሆነ ያን ችግሮች ይቀረፋሉ።
ያ አገር ተረካቢ የሆነ ከመጀመሪያው ደረጃ በጥሩ መንገድ ታንጾ ካደገ ጥሩ አገር ገንቢ በልማትም በኩል ጥሩ አይነት መንስኤ ይዞ ይሄዳል።
ነገ በዚህ አካባቢ እና በዚህ ማህበረሰብ ላይ የሚኖረው ነገ የኛ የአብራካችን ክፋይ ሊሆን ይችላል። የአብራካችን ክፋይ ባይሆንም እያንዳንዱ ኢትዮጵያውያን እኛ እርስ በርሳችን ወንድማማቾች ነን። ስለዚህ ይሄንን ነገር ማድረጋችን ለቀጣዩ ትውልድ መንገድ መክፈት ከፊት ለፊት መስመር ማስመር ነው የሚሆነው። ነገ ለሚጓዘው ጉዞ ነገ ለሚኖረው የተሻለ ህይወት መስመር ማስመር ነው።
Excellent. So I would like to present Nagash now to elaborate on what you're doing in Ethiopia as Population, Health and Environment Ethiopia Corporation. I don't speak French. How do I start this again? Ethiopia, Nagash, please.
Thank you, Ida. So, from the presentation you have seen, it says 76 million, but now Ethiopia has above 100 million. In the last few years, we have increased the population size to around 100 million. There is boom, you could say, population boom. The population trend globally, in the north, in the developing, it is expressed by underpopulation. In developing countries, it is expressed by overpopulation. So, without addressing population dynamics, sustainable development is impossible. This should be a well understood issue. And when it comes to Ethiopia, Ethiopia is one of the progressive countries who is achieving in reproductive health more than any country, you could say. Despite that, still we are facing the challenge of population growth. Mainly if you take the hard to reach places like our forest area, our protected area. In this area, the community living in the surrounding of those forest and protected areas are those highly affected by unmet need of family planning, where fertility rate is very high than anywhere in the country. So the services, the health services, and even development services, infrastructure related, when comparing to the other places, it is very low in those areas. So when we say about climate adaptation, mitigation, resilience building, without addressing the community's interest, how we can bring a balanced growth in this area, we cannot have sustainable development for our planet, for the country, for the community. In addition, if you are to free yourself without freeing men and women who are suffering because of development not reaching them, you couldn't say we have a sustainable world. So the resilience building we are assuming in Ethiopia, without addressing how we can balance the growth in this area with the other areas, we cannot achieve our goal. But we have practical problems. In the community I am mentioning, like pastoralist communities, we have around 12 million pastoralist communities in Ethiopia. Those pastoralist communities are the most affected by climate change. Whenever drought happens, they are the ones who are being affected. If you see livestock days, many livestock of those pastoralists are dying. And when shortage of water is happening, it is those communities who are being affected. To change the life of pastoralist community, can we address without addressing the socio-economic condition that is becoming a challenge for women equality and equity, without addressing the cultural issues that undermines women equality, religious and other factors? You cannot discuss about resilience. The first achievement that should come is how we liberate those communities, how we tackle the socio-economic obstacles in those communities so that they can have the leverage to build their resilience. So to do that, that's why we headed our heading, what it says got to do with climate change. For pastoralist community, for communities living in the forest area, for communities living in the protected area. If we want resilience, they need to balance their family size. They need to achieve their right first, how to determine the number of their children, how they could determine in deciding in the economy of the house where the male decision is in the upper hand in our family, in our world. So without addressing the relationship of male and men, women and men, you cannot achieve what we are aspiring. So it is from this angle, without addressing the sexual reproductive health rights of communities in a right way, by tackling the socio-economic obstacles, we cannot achieve our sustainable development goals. It is from this perspective we want to discuss on this issue. And if you see the process of the negotiation, I have been attending these COP meetings since COP15, the Copenhagen conference, no one is really addressing in a right way. If you ask them in problem identification, yes, they say, yes, population is impacting. When it comes to solution, we don't see the family planning component as a solution. It is time to incorporate, if really we want a healthy planet, a healthy environment, a healthy, sustainable development, the family planning investment should be given priority. Without addressing that, we cannot have a sustainable planet. Thank you.
Thank you, Nagesh. And without further ado, I will let the minister, no, the ambassador to Morocco, not yet, you wish. That would be great. Ambassador to Morocco, Mr. Jan Mulder.
Actually, in the old days, there was a title minister used in the foreign service. There was not ambassador. There was somebody below the ambassador who was a minister at the embassy. Okay. Thank you for this opportunity to speak about climate change, what sex got to do with it. I do understand the title because it's not obvious to everybody that there is such a link. When you hear the first part of my intervention here today, you might also wonder where the connection to climate change is. But don't worry, I will come to it at the end. As a Danish ambassador to Morocco, I'm happy to participate in this debate together with our long-term partner, Sex and Samfund. Denmark has, by the way, a project cooperation with Morocco in which girls and women's rights play a central role. In our new Danish Arab Partnership Program, it is an obligation to include women's rights as an integrated part of a particular project whenever possible. In general, gender issues play an important role in a Danish development cooperation. The right of every girl and woman to decide freely over her own body is crucial. Ever since the International Conference on Population and Development in Cairo in 1994, promoting sexual and reproductive health and rights has featured prominently in Denmark's development cooperation. It is an issue we see closely linked to the empowerment of women and to creating prosperous, sustainable societies. It is not by chance that Denmark took this position. We have a powerful example in our own national history. 200 years ago, compulsory education for all children, boys and girls alike, was introduced. 100 years later, as one of the very first countries in the world, Denmark introduced the right to vote for women. It is firmly ingrained in our society that equal opportunities are absolutely key in order to progress and grow as a society. Permit me to quote the Danish Prime Minister when he opened the Women Deliver Conference in Copenhagen earlier this year. And I quote, "Some say that growth and prosperity is the best way to ensure equal gender opportunities. I think it is the other way around. Equal gender opportunities are a way to gain growth and prosperity." Last year, the world adopted the new Agenda for Sustainable Development with its 17 specific goals. The agenda holds important promises for the world's girls and women by including targets on the promotion of sexual and reproductive health and rights. Even though Denmark worked for a more ambitious outcome, we find that we have a good basis to move forward on. Now finally, I come to what all this has to do with climate change. We know that climate change affects men and women differently. When food becomes scarce as a result of drought, tensions tend to increase in a household, often resulting in gender-based violence. Children and young girls are vulnerable to sexual assault when they have to walk long distances to search for firewood or water. And women and children are often left behind to fend for themselves when men migrate to urban areas in search for better economic opportunities. Advancing gender equality and improving access to family planning, health services, and information is essential to address these underlying challenges. The Danish... I'll take a little water. The Danish government's commitment to sexual and reproductive health and rights enjoy strong support in the Danish society. This is not least due to the important work carried out by Danish civil society organizations like Sex and Samfund, which make sure that the issue is kept on the agenda. To achieve progress and deliver on the Sustainable Development Goals, we need broad involvement from governments, civil society, as well as the private sector. We need to build broad coalitions with focus on concrete action in order to overcome the challenges to sustainable development in all its dimensions. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Mr. Ambassador. Now we've come to the part of questions and answers. If the presentations have given any reason for a question for clarification or anything else. If not, I think I would like to ask Mr. Nagash if you can tell us a little about the fact that the Ethiopian government having included reproductive health in their national adaptation plans. As I understand, only around 8 countries did this, and Ethiopia is one of them, which is a symbol of, or shows how progressive Ethiopia is on this area. Can you tell us a little about how that came around? What was so specific about Ethiopia that the Ethiopian government chose to take this step?
Yeah, yes, it is true. Ethiopia has incorporated not only as a problem about the population issue, but also as a solution in the NAPAS, in the country's growth and transformation plan, and we have a family guide, family law, that incorporates those things as a guide to implementation. So as a result, Ethiopia is one of the countries that have tried to fulfill the Millennium Development Goals, one of the countries that has fulfilled to achieve the Millennium Development Goals, mainly in the area of child issues. We were the first, we could say. So it is the result of the importance that without addressing the health condition of the community, you cannot have a healthy economic development. But despite that, still we are challenged. We will be double of what we have now sometime after 50 years. So it's a worry at the same time. We are having every year with additional 2 million new population increase to our number. So unless we make a productive citizen, it is a burden for the country. The challenge is, yes, we are working hard, but despite that, we have around 5 million orphans and vulnerable children. We have many people unemployed, and the composition of the population of our country is almost from 0 to 30 years old, 70% of our society. So it's not a simple issue. This is the same to Nigeria, to other African countries. Africa will be, in the near future, to be 2 billion population size. So, yes, population is resource if we make it productive. We should appreciate having a population, but if we make them productive. So, in that line, trying to harvest the population dividend, this youngster, if we invest, this childbearing age, if we could invest in a right way, aggressively, we can change it into productive citizen, productive country, productive citizens. So Ethiopia is looking towards that, and that's why we are having aggressively development initiatives that encompass social, economic, and environmental. Ethiopia is not excellent only in such social issues at this moment. Even in the environment, we have the climate resilient green economy, which is part of the growth and transformation plan, which the country is aligning to the sustainable development goals. So it is the result of the push of the civil society, the government, the total activity. We have projects that could be taken as a pilot that could contribute to accelerate how the integration should happen.
Thank you. And maybe a question for both of you, if you have an answer to it. As I mentioned, and as you mentioned as well, Negash, climate people tend to have a difficulty talking about social issues, talking about issues that are not technical as such. Do you have any idea what is needed to change that? How do we dissolve these artificial silos of different sectors and different spheres of sustainable development?
Yeah, the problem with environmentalists comes from their, as you said, sectoral mentality. The same is with social groups also, the health groups. We have the sector mentality. So I have a practical example. We have a project called SHARE, that is a comprehensive approach in Bali ecoregion. Before we were handling our projects alone, but this time we brought the conservation organizations like Pharma Africa, SOS Sahel, Frankfurt Zoological Society, who are conservation organizations, IWMI, and at the beginning when we developed together the project to make it inclusive, they have resistance to the social issues. They said, this is none of our area. But later on, when we came into action, they are impressed how addressing the social issues as part of the conservation activity can sustain their conservation work. Because in the area where we were working, they had good farmers who have been liberating themselves economically. But once they liberate themselves, they have economy. They were thinking, if I have more profit, I should add more women, wives, because polygamy allows them. They were not realizing that this is a burden for the conservation work they were doing. Now they realize it. Empowering the woman equally, liberating the woman, addressing the socio-economic condition of the woman will balance the family size. Than they have average 10 children, they could have 4 or 5 children. This will limit the pressure on the forest, on the conservation work. So it is by practical engagement we can change their attitude. So 2 things should be done. On our side, we need to develop evidences that really convince conservation or organizations and practitioners the added value of incorporating the social issues towards the conservation work. Equally, the conservationists should also understand on the value of the population or the social issues. So it is a mutual work, but sustainable development is now saying the SDG goals, inclusive, no one should be left behind. It is from the perspective we need to come together to address the community's integrated living, integrated demands.
Yes, thank you.
I don't have much to add after this very extensive answer. My only, and of course I totally agree with this sector problem. My only comment should be that even if you don't speak so much about this issue in the climate context, you do speak about it in other contexts which do help the climate problem, because what we are talking about today, equal opportunity and reproduction rights, family planning, these are issues which are in themselves important. Equal opportunities is a human right, and family planning is a social issue that you have to tackle for social and economic reasons. And then, if I might be permitted to say so, then it has a side effect on the climate change. So what you do for human rights reasons, for social reasons, for economic reasons in the gender area has at the same time a positive effect to combat climate change.
That is true. Do you want to? No. I just wanted to add to that is completely true. What we have seen in countries like Ethiopia and Kenya and Uganda, etc., is that when you integrate these efforts, if you don't go to a community just to speak about family planning and then leave, and then another group of civil society organizations or civil servants come and go to the same community and speak about environmental issues, then you can do that, and of course they will help each other. But if you integrate them, if you do it at the same time, if you explain to a community not only why they should harvest their crops in a different way, but if you at the same time tell them about how they could plan their families and thus have more food for the entire family, then that actually has a great impact and a greater impact. It's cost efficient, and as the video showed us, this means that men will engage more in gender issues, women will become more empowered in terms of generating an income, and thus there are a lot of co-benefits that you don't necessarily get when you solve issues on a sector basis. But of course they help each other out. Nagash, final comment before we have to end? Okay, we have no time left. Is it a quick answer? Oh, quick question? Yeah.
Thank you. To have one question for Ambassador. Right there. We are saying that climate change is related to population. how, when we talk about addressing climate change problems, impacts, climate change adaptation is one approach. Climate change adaptation means reducing vulnerability of communities, countries, systems to climate change impacts. While we address climate change impacts, while we try to address vulnerability factors, there are countries, there are regions where population growth has high vulnerability factor. Population growth is a high vulnerability factor for adaptation.
Which factor?
High population. High population is a vulnerability factor for climate change. That means climate change will exacerbate problems of climate change problems in high populated areas. So we are saying that while we have population climate change adaptation plans, NAPs, while we are try to budget climate change adaptation efforts, how do you see it integrating the population element, addressing population factor, the importance of addressing population factors in NAPs, in national adaptation plans? How Denmark sees these things? How you see personally these things? Do we need to address also how you are ready to support processes of negotiations while budgeting for NAPs to include, who have an integrated approach for that one, even to support efforts in some countries to address this one? If you got my answer, my question.
No, but my answer will be more or less what I said before, that population growth makes climate adaptation more difficult. And reducing population growth, family planning is a adaptation measure. But what I'm saying, I keep saying that it is an adaptation measure at the same time as it solves other problems of social and economic character. But of course I agree with Ida when she says that we should not just take it as side effect. We should also discuss it when you discuss adaptation measures. Yeah.
Thank you. And again, this is not a minister of climate we have in the on the podium. It is the ambassador to Morocco. So, yeah. And in Morocco, actually, I hear that fertility rates are quite at 2 or something like that, 2 children per woman, which is very, very good, impressive. Thank you to our presenters. Should we give them a hand? And then to wrap up, I don't know if you noticed, but you are sitting on a climate condom. And that is, of course, our little gimmick for COP22 and our means of pushing for the COP22 discussions to include reproductive health and family planning as adaptation measures. And I'm being told that we are done now, and that is great. Thank you so much for coming and for being here, and take the condoms and give them to someone you think would find it funny. Det er jo sådan, det er her derudefra, hva'? Jeg kan simpelthen ikke fransk. Jeg aner ikke, hvordan jeg skal lukke ned her. Okay, fint.
Just to make sure, we have another event in 10 minutes, so we could